Mike and Paul Burvid coming at you every Saturday, noon until 2 here on WRMN 1410 AM. You can stream us on WRMN1410.com, or you could follow us on the YouTube live channel for WRMN 1410 out of Elgin. Studio number here is 847-931-1410, and the text number is 505-926-1410. Let's get some more text in there. So, Paul, how you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I mean, how's the shutdown affecting you so far?
Not at all.
Yeah, not me either. I'm like,
but I'm sure some people are being adversely affected, but not me at all.
Yeah. So, other than the shutdown, I guess the biggest thing in the news is is the remodeling of the White House, like a remodeling of one room, and I don't even want to get into that because this is something that everyone that moves into a new apartment or a new house or something does a little bit of, and almost every president has thrown his own touch onto the White House. So if that's the worst thing they could pick up going on in the news, I think things are going pretty good.
I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right.
So what I want to talk about is, because this is a veterans started out as a veterans show, and a shout out to all my veteran buddies at the Dunkin' Donuts Veterans over on Dempster and Niles every Tuesday, 8 to 9 to whenever it's over. Usually they're done by 10:30, but guys get there like 7 o'clock and they start commiserating and having some donuts and coffee. So it's a good time, and a lot of information is put out there. A lot of information, the veterans information. And the main thing is, the guys that run the place, Carlos and Roger, the guys that run the show there, they stress like every veteran should register with the VA. Not a lot of them do. Not all of them do. There's a considerable amount of veterans that haven't done it. And so I wanted to talk about registering with the VA, but not just registering with the VA, applying for any benefits you think you might be entitled to. So, Paul, last year, there was a big push to pass a bill in the state of Illinois to prevent what we call claim sharks.
Yeah, predatory guys.
Yeah, there's predatory guys out there. So the key thing is, you don't need anybody. You don't need an attorney. You don't need a public defender. You don't need anybody except for yourself to apply for these claims. And of course, the VA, you're going to apply them to the VA. But before I mess up and say something dumb, all right, and people might misinterpret, I'm going to read the disclaimer. The information on this show is for informational purposes only and should not be considered as legal advice on any subject matter. The views put forward on this show are the opinions of the hosts, Michael Tuman, Paul Burvid, and their guests, callers, and not necessarily those of WRMN 1410 AM. Good, I got that out of the way. Everything seems complicated. Now, I think it's no more complicated than doing your taxes. Especially if you got slightly, you got a few investments here. You have a few deductions there. You got to itemize because you don't just take your general deduction. And once you read the instructions and plug in the numbers and get it all there and have your receipts, your W-2s, your pay stubs and everything lined up, it's really not that difficult. Well, for me, but it is intimidating because everyone says how complicated it is. And then you get it into your brain that it's really complicated and that it's really difficult to do. And your brain twists and you get the anxiety on it and you say, well, I don't even want to mess with that. It's not worth it. but it is worth it. You know, so the claim sharks, these are guys, these are companies, and it's not against the law to be a claim shark in Illinois. It isn't. It is not. You could be a claim shark. The only stipulation they put on it is that if you're an organization that charges to help people apply for VA benefits, you have to tell the client that there are people out there, veteran service officers, claim agents, and other like pro bono attorneys that do this for free, that do it for free. They don't charge anything. They do it for free, mostly the veteran service officers, the VSOs. And they're all accredited by the VA to help you do that. In order to do this, you have to be accredited by the VA. People could go in and hire these guys out, but they're not putting their name on anything. You put your own name on it, and these guys kind of keep off of it, but you sign a side agreement that if you get a percentage and a cash payment, that they're going to take a certain percentage of that for helping you. The trouble is when it gets up to like 25%, and they do that for the life, it's not one flat fee. They're predatory. So now they're getting $1,000 a month for the rest of your life, and you're only getting like, if you're at 100%, you're only getting like 2,900. So if you're an agency that puts together like 100 of those guys and you're getting $100,000 a month, literally for just filling out paperwork, it seems like a pretty good scam. So you did some research on this, right?
In the past, yeah. It's kind of a sliding scale. I think we talked about this in relation to a friend of mine that went to Social Security. Okay, and I know they're two different things, but just to let you know, this friend of mine he got sick. He got really very sick, and we worked for the state, and you were entitled to both duty and non-duty disability, and his sickness was considered to be non-duty disability. So in essence, you get half your pay, okay? And they give it to you, but they make you jump through all kinds of hoops, okay? And he couldn't work. He really couldn't work. So, but they have, it's kind of like a scam, okay? They make you apply for Social Security, okay? And there's an ulterior purpose for that. Because when you get it, then they reduce all future claims till they've been paid back until you retire. Okay. Now, we had some friends that were aligned with the old 3rd Congressional District. And we went down there and we met with, at the time it was Congressman Lipinski's people, and they were very helpful. Okay. And they said, they used to do this, like you're saying, for free. But the Social Security Administration came down on them. So they were recommending this guy. And the guy they recommended was a guy named Mr. Miller. And not a plug here, but Mr. Miller's a great guy. And if anybody's having Social Security issues, I would go see him. He's not a lawyer, okay, but he is familiar with this. So like you said, you sign an agreement with the individual, okay, and they're entitled to a flat fee, okay, which they were, okay, and the way that Social Security did it, they played a game with them. They gave them disability for X date until the date of the decision. Okay. So that meant he got some back pay for his children and everything. But we had to then pay back the state. Now, that does nothing about going forward because he still could not work. So we had two choices: to file an appeal, which could change the original verdict, or again, going forward forever. So that's what we chose to do, go forward forever. And we had another hearing, and we went forward, and we got a different judge, and then they granted it, okay? And again, the state came after us. Now, I argued we paid him once, it's res judicata, no more. And the people at the hearing were crying, and they all agreed they had never had, but they still charged him. So then for an X amount of years, he got reduced state benefits until the second batch was paid until his a normal retirement would be. But, you know, he went to this private individual, and I have a feeling that had we done this ourselves, we would have not been successful. Now, the thing is that it was limited in scope, and the weird thing is the state gave him credit for paying the private individual. So they didn't take that as back pay because they would have had to do it, and they wouldn't do it. So what happened was the state ended up subsidizing the guy we hired, which is really kind of strange. But whenever you set up an administrative system like that, you run the risk of having these different levels, or like we're saying, sharks, predatory people, and you don't know sometimes what's the best. Because I know that when we went to those hearings, they go all out to try to bar you from getting something. I mean, they knew he went to Canada on a fishing trip with his son for the son's graduation. They were trying to argue if you could go to Canada, you could drive a truck, or if you could do this. And then I had to bring things up with, like, he'd go to the gas station, he'd fill up a 5-gallon tank for his lawnmower, and he'd leave the gas there and drive away. So how could you be a school bus driver if it's wintertime and you pull the bus in and you forget to check to see if a kid's on the bus and freezing? Or if you are a courier and you misdeliver $1 million in bearer bonds. It's not that simple. And then because of Mr. Miller and my testimony, he was able to do this, but and get it. But it's a sword that cuts both ways, because as Roosevelt said, unless you're in the arena, you don't know what it's like. And like you're saying, I think it should be mandatory that these states offer these programs for these veterans with these claims, and that it be a state individual that guide them. But
they do.
You know,
The Veterans Administration in the state of Illinois has veteran service officers.
Right, but I think it should be mandatory. I think one should be assigned to each case.
Yeah, but in the VA rules, that's their choice. You know,
yeah, I know.
It's your choice. And some people don't like doing it because you're in essence granting the VSO some sort of power of attorney over your medical records and stuff that gets switched in.
Yeah.
And there are people, but that's their choice. But
you're exactly right.
Like the American Legion, the VFW, even the Polish Legion of American Veterans have veteran service officers that they pay like they're paying it out of our dues. All right, they pay for these veteran service officers. That's their full-time job. And the great thing they have, I got a zombie. They have this thing out here, Nightmare on Chicago, and I got a zombie out on the window there. So I wish you could have turned the camera on. Anyways, so they put that, but there's not really enough of them. Currently, Cook County is trying to hire more because we got a very dense population of veterans there in Cook County. We're trying to hire more so these veterans can apply for that. The key thing is that these veteran service officers get training and they get experience and they see what works and what doesn't work and wordsmithing and what you need for certain levels, like hearing loss is a big one. Almost everyone in the service gets hearing loss because you're on muffled trucks. You're firing weapons, you're listening to radios, everything's pretty loud there. So most everyone has some sort of hearing loss. So if you claim a disability on that, you have to be able to verbalize that. One of the mistakes I made, and I didn't use a veteran service officer because for me, these forms were not very intimidating. But I went to talk to a guy this is a guy that they contracted out, a doctor, they contracted out to evaluate your claim, like how sick are you and everything. Dude started practicing medicine in 1957. 1957. So I'm there in 2020, right, 21. I'm like, my God, this guy's been practicing for 63 years. He's still alive. I'm like, what sort of a doctor is he where he's still working? And he's in like some back medical office. It was really weird. And he was going over my records, right, the day that I was there. You could tell that he hadn't read them. And I had 38 years in the service with medical records. So he's just glancing this stuff. And he asks me one key question, right? He says, how many days of work did you miss last month because of asthma? And I said, I'm retired. I should have said all of them. I didn't have to caveat it with I'm retired, but he was basing it on how much work I missed. I mean, maybe he didn't understand that some of us could retire younger than 90 years old.
Right.
All right. So the takeaway on this is they have reviewers, and the big complaint about the VA is that they're hiring the raters, the people that read your application. So your application gets put in, then they send you off to be evaluated, sometimes by VA doctors, sometimes by contractors. All right.
Yes.
And you get evaluated, and those people evaluating send in your report. And then the raters look at it. Now, these raters are barely trained. Some of them don't have military experience. None of them, they don't have medical experience. They've got a checklist. They're looking for keywords and things, and they're going to say whether you got a rating, at what level. I mean, it's all very objective. For these raters, they're not subjective, they're very objective. They look at their checklist. If you make it or whatever, then they award you whatever they can. So if you have a VSO and he knows this, and he's played the game with these guys, he knows what to put in to your application to make sure that they see it and that it's rated at a certain level. It's kind of funny that way. Now, if they don't give you a disability rating or anything, you could always appeal that. And there's multiple levels of appeal with the VA. At the some guys, the Agent Orange guys, the Gulf War guys, they were going all the way up to like having lawyers, and this is at the VA facility, and they had to go and testify in Virginia, and
right.
Finally it gets overturned, and they say, yeah, you got a disability for that. So, but the thing that people don't I think one of the key things they don't understand, and there's a big, even amongst reservists and National Guard guys. So back during the Cold War days, we didn't have a lot of reservists being deployed between Vietnam or National Guard guys between Vietnam and Desert Storm. And these guys did their 6 years in the reserves, and they did basic training. They went to their skill training, and then all they were doing was weekends, 1 weekend, and then 2 weeks during the summer. Maybe they did it at their armory, or maybe they did it at some camp, or even a fort. But that's all they ever did. And when they finished their term of service, they only get a certificate of service. They don't get a 214. A DD 214 for that, which is a discharge form. It's the most important document that you'll ever get in the military. A DD 214, Department of Defense Form 214, and but you could still apply for VA benefits because it includes what they call inactive duty service. So one of the things like Joliet training area. Right? I was down there. Do you know that place tested like unbelievable levels of radium?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And we're all down there. We're like in the wet site over there, in the woods, in the scrub grass. They have a drop zone over there for parachutists, and you're in there. You're out there for a weekend, and you're just absorbing all this toxic goodness. You're just absorbing it. And maybe you get what they call presumptive condition, right? So, like with the burn pits, like asthma is a presumptive condition for the burn pits, So they go, oh well, we have to assume that you got that on training because you documented that you were there and that you got this asthma, and that's what they would know, the VSOs. So it's not just if you're active duty or inactive duty, the reserves and National Guard. If you had a condition before you got into the military, but it got worse, that counts. If you got a condition that while you're in the military, it counts. If you got a condition within a year of coming back, getting out of the military, that counts. And like I got that within a year. I got like near-death pneumonia, and within a year of coming back from Afghanistan. And the doctor listed as exercise-induced asthma.
Wow.
All right, so we'll be back.
Okay.
2 and WRMN 1410 AM, which because you're here, you're listening. So if you can't look at your car dial on the radio, you're on 1410 AM. Or you're streaming it on WRMN1410.com, which is kind of the best way, although you're kind of chewing up gigabytes on your phone. But I have unlimited, so chew up the gigabytes. Or you could be right here on YouTube Live, where me and Paul, you could see us. We're on the cameras, and you could call us in at 847-931-1410. You could hit us up in the chat on the YouTube Live channel, or you could just text us at 8505. You think I would have it memorized? 505-926-1410. I guess that's a penguin that just keeps jumping off the iceberg. That's an analogy, Paul. There's human memory is like a giant iceberg with a couple penguins on it. It starts out with a couple penguins on it, and it's a giant iceberg. And the penguins are your memories, and the iceberg is your brain capacity. And so as you develop more memories, more and more penguins get on the iceberg. And then, but slowly as you get older, the iceberg starts melting, and you start losing penguins.
Good one. That's a good one.
I'm losing these penguins at an astounding rate. It's like they're in the Caribbean and they're getting blasted by a destroyer. Okay, so what the point I was making before we left is just because you were never on active duty, guys say, "Oh, I was just reserve and National Guard." No, that you're a veteran, counts as being a veteran, all right? And you could apply for disability because a lot of these places and a lot of the training you did, a lot of Marines went and did their 2 weeks at Camp Lejeune, where they're stuck drinking that water and stuff. Marine reserves, right? And as a member of the Army Reserve, we went down to Camp Lejeune sometimes, right? So you can apply. You can also apply for these benefits. The kicker here is that if you have a bad conduct discharge, right, or you have a dishonorable discharge, which is the worst discharge you get there, is that they won't let you apply for benefits. However, there is a process to have your discharge upgraded. So the first step, if you're one of the unfortunate people that fell under that category, and recently there were hundreds of people that were dishonorably discharged from the service for refusing to take a medical shot. And they've been overturning those and clearing their record and clearing the dishonorable discharge and bringing them back into the service. And they're even paying them back pay and everything. But what I'm saying is if you have a dishonorable discharge, there may have been extenuating circumstances that weren't known back then. There may have been people that lied about something and then they recanted, but it's too bad you got the discharge. So the first step there is to apply to have your discharge upgraded. And there's ways to do that. And a veteran service officer will help you with that also. It's not just for, they're not just for your benefits, although I think having a better discharge is kind of a benefit, but they'll help you with that. So now, you got your discharge upgraded, you're at a general or you're with that honorable discharge. But you don't have your 214, your DD 214. Not that you're one of the reserve. So if you do more than 90 days of active duty in a row, they give you a DD 214, Department of Defense Form 214. And it shows your times of service, courses you went through, awards you've had, foreign service that you've had. It's a very general form on that. If you don't have that form, if you lost it, if it was for whatever, multiple reasons, and they tell you when they give it to you, this is the most important piece of paper you'll ever get. Don't lose it, but you're just so in a hurry to get out of there, So you can apply for it to get it back, and your 214. You could go through. You go through the National Archives. You go to the National Archives, and there's a form there to get your 214. If they don't have it, they might redirect you to your service. So I would go to Army. A Marine would go to the Department of the Navy. All right. A sailor would go Department of Navy. Air Force would go to Department of Air Force, and they said, "Hey, I need a copy of my 214. I lost it." And they're supposed to have it, and they get it to you. Now you got your 214. You got your discharge papers. You can even get your entire file. Back in the 80s, there was a fire and a lot of stuff was lost, but not everyone's. That was a little bit. So it would be kind of rare if your files were amongst those and you're still alive right now. So you get that, you get those forms, you're all set. You go to your VSO, and you got to gather up medical records. Like I said, it's like doing your taxes. You want to have your receipts there. You want to have your pay stubs there. You want to have your W-2s. You want everything lined up. Your 1099s. Well, every time you went to a doctor, what helps is, if you were under medical insurance, you go to, you use the same insurance company all the time. They should have a records for you, get those medical records, put together what you think your disability is, hearing loss, guys get older, they naturally lose their hearing, but I think veterans lose it at an accelerated rate. And one of the things is, good set of hearing aids, right? Cost what, about $5,000? They're expensive. They're very expensive. But if you get a hearing loss rating from the VA, they'll give it to you for free, along with any disability payments you might get. And there's, like I said, you could have a condition. You might have, I'm trying to think of a good condition for this. You might have like IBS, right? Or something. You might have something, your stomach isn't good all the time, but you can join because you're good enough. And then over the time of being in the Army, deploying, getting weird food or all this stuff, it gets worse and worse and worse. So you may have had the thing before, like glasses, right? You get glasses and you have this prescription your whole life until you're like you're 18. And now you join the Army and the flashbangs and the grease in your eyes, the gas in their eyes, the cordite, everything else, the big flashes, all that stuff, causes your vision to get even more blurry, and now you're progressively getting worse eyes, right? So you can have vision loss. But that was something you already had. You already wore glasses, and they said, well, you still wear glasses. You wore glasses before you came in, but it got worse. Or like I said, within, getting shot, that's a big one, right? Stitches, getting cut, breaking bones, concussions. All those things like happen when you're in. And then it could be like within a year of getting out. So I get out and they said, well, like me, I had near-death pneumonia. And that was within a year of getting out. Now, they're going to say, well, you got pneumonia not in the Army. You got pneumonia out on the streets of Chicago. Possible. But I would say those burn pits in Afghanistan were pretty much, conducive to it. It just took a while. It took a while for the damage to display itself. So those are the reasons you can apply for the disability there. Then there is a general disability, like service-related disability. You're going to get a payment on it. But there's a combat disability. All right, the combat related. So you were in a hazardous duty or combat zone and you get disability. So for me, collecting an Army pension, if my disability wasn't from a combat zone, right, they would deduct whatever I'm getting from the VA for disability off of my Army pension. I got that Amber Alert earlier. So we're going to put out an Amber Alert right now. Matt says you could have just, yeah.
Yeah, so there's a Amber Alert, Riverdale, Illinois. There's a 2010 silver Acura MDX, license plate FE60619. If seen, please call 911. Further information: 4 children were taken at about 1:30 a.m. in Riverdale at 136 and Low. So just wanted to put that information out there for you. Police are calling this a domestic incident.
I think they only do the Amber Alerts when they're family related. So yeah, I used to work out there in the that's all.
Altgeld Gardens area.
Yeah, Altgeld Gardens. Yeah, I'm thinking because there's another one over by the old 12th district. The 12th district we used to work in, that was the Obla homes. Yeah, Altgeld Obla homes. Yeah, so that's pretty close down there. 4 kids probably shouldn't be with the person they're with.
Let's hope they find them soon.
Yeah.
Hey, I got a question for you. Say you were in the military and you got a discharge, and it was honorable discharge, and you went in subsequent to that again, and you got a discharge, but it wasn't an honorable discharge. Are you still able to get veterans benefits for the first discharge?
Oh, see, that's that. See, okay, so I'm going to make it. This is kind of like a legalese thing, right? So I'm not giving any advice. I'm not giving any advice, but I would take that to less than honorable discharge and never mention it again. I would go with the first one. However, they could check your records because you're going to give them. These are all on file. Your discharge is going to be all on file. You're going to have a service number. Used to be a social security number. Then they issued a service number. So we go back to service numbers again. And yeah, they're going to be able to look and say, hey, hold on a second. You know, that because was the nature of my service in the beginning, how to put this? I'm going to have to get back to you on that one, really, because I would just be, all right, so General Sinclair, he was the deputy commander of the 82nd Airborne Division. And he was moving up to be the commander of the 82nd Airborne Division. Only dude decided that he was going to have a little fling with a captain that worked for him, right? And this is, God knows how long it was going on. And he fought it. They court-martialed him. And he fought it, and he spent a lot of money, and he beat it. He actually beat it, So he got an honorable discharge, right? But then he applied for his pension. And the people at the Army board, right, said, in our estimation, you were having a bad a relationship with another service member, not what do you call it? It's not in the best interest of the Army, the best interest of discipline and morale of the Army, So you shouldn't be doing it. And they said, the last time we can prove that you weren't doing it, or you could prove that you weren't doing it, was when you were a lieutenant colonel, because we think you were messing with these other women when you were a colonel. So they said, we only have to pay you your pension based on your last honorable service. And they considered his pension as honorable as lieutenant colonel. So he went from 2-star general down to lieutenant colonel pay. But he retired as a general. They didn't take the stars away from him, but they took the pay away from him. So that would be military law, the Uniform Code of Military Justice, the UCMJ, all right? That's different than Title 10 of the U.S. Code, because it falls under military justice, but the proof and everything, the level of proof is different. Right? So I would say that, okay, so you get other than honorable discharge, right? But your honorable service, right? Your honorable service, you do 3 years, right? And you get out, you get a 214. And then you get out, you can't find a job or whatever. You said, hey, the Army was okay, and you get back in. But under your first 3 years, let's say you got some pretty bad PTSD that didn't show itself, right? And now you come back and you're self-medicating, and you get 2 DUIs, and they give you an other than honorable discharge, or less than honorable discharge, right? Because 2 DUIs. So I would say, do you think that the PTSD that hadn't really shown itself under the first 3 years, but you got it, you're in combat zone, lots of things happened, everything there, and now did that have an effect on your second term of service?
It could have.
Yeah. So now you got to go to the Army Board of Corrections on that. So there there are avenues to correct that. And remember, you talked about your friend who wasn't a lawyer there, Mr. Miller.
Yeah.
I had, I'm not going to mention names, but a colonel that I knew, right? And out of nowhere, he contacts me about an incident in Afghanistan. And I told him, I stopped him. I says, go get a lawyer, not a lawyer local from Chicago, like even the best lawyer downtown, you know, big corporate firm. Go get the Army Times. Go get the Army Times magazine. Find the lawyers that work out of D.C. by the Pentagon, the military lawyers there. Get one of those guys. They're going to know exactly what to do. You need to protect your career right now. You just don't, don't do, don't, you need, I told them flat out, you absolutely need a lawyer. You could do all this paperwork and everything and try to go through it, or you could get what they call a judge advocate general lawyer appointed to you by the military. That's true, right? But you could get a guy like, a few good men, like, what's it?
Tom Cruise.
Tom Cruise guy, right? And,
Yeah.
And, he's against the system and he's all for you and everything. And when you really think about it, though, are these guys for the military or are they for you? They're supposed to be for you. You swear an oath, right? Public defender. You get your public defender, and you get the scum of the earth, and you know for a fact this guy's absolutely, he even admits to you that he's guilty. Right? Oh yeah, I did it. You still got to provide the best defense you know how. Absolutely got to give your best defense to that guy, right?
Absolutely.
But, it's like, so at this point, I would go, when you are defending your career, your legacy, your pension, everything else, go get a guy that's going to fight for you, that's done this before. Same thing with veterans benefits. If you really need the veterans benefits, you're not just need it like an entitlement to you, right? You're entitled to them. And get the best VSO Go out, get a VSO. And if you get overturned, then go out and get a lawyer. But make sure that these guys are accredited by the VA. All right? Because you want that guy to know that if he really messes you up, he's going to lose his accreditation. All right? And you want to have some assurances that he's working for you and not for the VA. It's always a we versus them thing, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And you got to think of how to defend yourself. But some people have to go that far. Some people, it's like right away. My buddy, I told him, he told me about an injury he had. And I says, hey, have you registered with the VA? Because that happened on active duty. That's active duty stuff. You should get, you could have back problems. Your back problems could be caused by that. Other things could be caused by that injury you sustained. And finally, he applies with the VA, and he got disability. They're like, yeah, you're right. And boom, and he got some presumptive stuff because he worked in the motor pool. It's not a very clean environment in the motor pool. There's benzene all over the place. There's the solvents that you're using. There's the paint, the telly oil, everything. It's nasty. And then you're wondering why you can't run a block and a half because you've been sucking in these fumes because, the exhaust fan isn't working and the Corps of Engineers doesn't have time to do it until they're going to tear the building down. It's what I say, and reiterating here, step one, register with the VA. If you don't have your 214 or your documents, apply through the National Archives or your branch of service to get those. Then apply with the VA. All right. They're not going to give you, they probably won't give you medical benefits right away unless you're like, what do you call it? Destitute. You know, you don't have a lot of money. You don't have medical benefits, but you're a veteran and you might not even have a disability. They'll go, okay, you come to the VA hospital, at which time they, you know, you got to pay for your co-pays for your medicine prescriptions and everything. And there's usually a co-pay for every visit you go to, which was only like $50, you know? So you get the whole, whenever I go and they give me the whole, they were giving me the whole blood test, urine test, you know, going through everything. You know, you go in there, then they write me a prescription for the Buterol for the asthma, right? And, you know, I pay $5 for that, $50 for the, $50 for the visit. Where else are you going to get that? And like the whole thing, they're like, oh, well, you're almost toxic on vitamin D. Stay out of the sun, you know? So if you're destitute, you don't have the insurance, you know, and everything. This is it. If you got really good insurance, they might say, no, your insurance is too good. Go use a regular doctor. Don't crowd up the VA, right? Some people get the insurance through their work. But if you have any disability at all, if you're listed as disabled, then they're going to let you use the VA. And we got some more zombies. There all seem to be military zombies today. Yeah. We got ACU zombies. We got BDU zombies. All right, so ready for the next half of the show, Paul.
All right.
As soon as the... It's out there for the VA, you know, like I said, the education, everything else. And I can't stress how much every service member out there should absolutely register with the VA. And, you know, if you want to do something for fellow veterans, go register with the VA. I'm not saying join the Legion or join the VFW or join the Special Forces Association or join the Polish Legion of American Veterans or, you know, any of the multiple groups that are out there for veterans. I'm saying register with the VA because when, you know, when we're all the same is we should all be registered with the VA. And that's going to take, you might not need the disability money. You might not need the medical coverage. You might not need the education benefits. But if you're not using them, the government's still, if you're registered, the government's going to budget for that. And if you don't use them, they're going to have more budget to help other people have better help for your fellow veterans that may need it. So, any more war stories about disability claims?
Well, you know, I've known people that I have a friend who's got eye problems, and you know, if you apply for disability, you're supposed to get benefits, and again, they a lot of times they make you go to, like you said, they make you go to their own doctor, and the doctor's not really there to treat you. Okay, he's just there to help them, you know, dismiss the claim. You know, and when I tell people, I said, hey, you know, when you're filling this stuff out, and the biggest problem you could have when you're doing this stuff is they ask you how you're doing. And if you say, I'm doing better every day.
Oh, they use that against you.
Yeah,
like I said, how many days of work did you miss last month? And I haven't
worked at all. I couldn't work at all.
Yeah, I should have said I haven't worked at all, but I says I'm retired. So none. You know?
And they have this tremendous like log, and they know, like, he went to all these doctors, and you know, they said he reports he's doing well. he reports he's doing this. And, you know, I'm not trying to be funny, you know. The guy would like literally go to the bathroom all the time. So he told somebody that, you know, I can get away with it by not eating. So then they say, okay, so he doesn't have to eat before he goes into work. Well, you can't do that. You could pass out at work. And, you know, they'll write reports that he's able to not eat and then he could do his work. And then, you know, you find out, and I didn't know this, like, if you know, there's magic, like you said, there's magic terms you could use and stuff like that. If you can't, if you have to take more than like 4 breaks a day to go to the bathroom, no employer will keep you. So they'll fire you. So they know that. So, you know, you have to tell them, I have to go to the bathroom constantly. And they go, well, what do you mean? 2, 3, 4 times an hour, you know? And that's one of the issues, like, excuse me, if you have IBS, you might be going to the bathroom 15, 18, 20 times a day. All right. And a lot of it's when you're at work, you know, if you're gone, can't answer the phone, can't deal with people. I mean, you need to let them know that and not say, well, that's embarrassing or this or that. You need to just be flat up and say, look, you know, I go to the bathroom a lot. I don't want to go to the bathroom, but I have to go to the bathroom. And then, you know, then you know, that all has to be in your record, because they'll just say, well, you could wear a diaper. That's another thing they'll tell you. You could wear a diaper, or you could wear this, or you could wear that. And one of the big things is, I found out with the Social Security is, they like to say that you can fold a towel somewhere, you know, like you can work at a gym. And I said to them, I go, okay, well, if the dude in front of you has hepatitis and you're folding the towel and you make a mistake and you fold the used towel up and you give it to a new guy and throw the good towel that wasn't, and then they can't answer that. That, you know, like, oh, he's got a contagious disease or whatever, and, you know, he can't separate them, or he can't do this. And you have to be able to think of that, because they're always looking to lull you into this thing where, well, what would it take? Like you said, what would it take for you to be able to work every day? A new job, because I'm retired, you know. I mean, you know, it's crazy, but you know, and they bring a guy in our case, they brought him in from like the Quad Cities, and, you know, he would sit there and he would look down and he would say, there's this job category that's available in Elgin, or that and he would look down. So then I would look at him in response. I go, well, again, why would I want him to drive a bus when my kid's on it in the winter when he forgets everything? And then I go, you know, and then the guy looks down and looks away, and then the judge will say, well, he brings up a valid point. Have you accounted for that? Well, that wasn't in the record. Or that wasn't, you know, so you need to, you know, be aware of all that stuff, because they're always trying to minimize your problem, but maximize.
It's an adversarial position for some people. It seems that there's other groups of people that it's like it's expected. They go in, boom, no problem. There you go. Can't work, no problem. You know, here you go, SSI disability. There you go. The funny thing was, it was like...
Well, what my friend pointed out was, when he first started out as a lawyer, he worked for one of those Social Security firms, right? And he pointed out to them that there's some people that get SSI disability right when they turn 18, because they're an alcoholic and they never work a day in their life.
They called it. I loved it in the ghetto. You know, when I was working as the police, they called it. This is my favorite. Organic substance dependency.
Exactly.
They don't say dope. They say organic substance, heroin, cocaine, dependency, and then they pay them disability. Hey, but you know what they're not telling them? Well, you go to rehab.
Right.
And then you get a job. You know, that's not permanent. But
they'd rather pay
here's the
organic substance disability forever than get them back on the path of being a productive citizen and bettering themselves.
They had the old people's homes in Chicago, the CTA for retirees. You know, you had to be 55 plus to be in these homes. And the ACLU goes and sues them because they said these are people that are, well, they had to be like 62 plus. They had to be on Social Security to get into it. They had to be Social Security age. ACLU says, Susan says, well, you got all these guys here, these homeless guys on SSI disability because they're heroin junkies, right? Or they're hooked to cocaine. You have to give them a room in those, if there's a room available, because they're on Social Security. You need to give them one of those rooms. I says, well, good. You're putting the prey right next to the predators. That's good. Good thinking there. Because they don't care because they're doing the letter of the law and they're just messing with everything. It's like, but yeah, that whole, it's like like I said, it's just a way, it's just a welfare payment, all right? It's just a welfare payment that they just using it as a slush fund for welfare, because a lot of these people they can work. They just don't want to get up at 5 a.m. and go to the day labor place. But getting back to that, right? So, like, look at this. You've gone to school your whole life. You've studied. You've got a Juris Doctorate degree. You worked as an intern somewhere, right? You don't have a criminal record, right? You work at this job as a lawyer and everything, and then you go blind. You can't read the papers. You got like IBS. You know, things are just bad with you. Like, you really can't leave your house, or you suddenly get such anxiety that you can't leave your house. And then you got some goof there that's got a GED, right? That got the job because, you know, they were right place, right time, or they got hired, right? Working for Social Security, and they tell you could fold towels somewhere.
Exactly.
Hey.
Exactly. It's ridiculous.
I'll tell you what. Why don't you fold towels and I'll do your job?
Right.
How about that?
Right. Exactly.
Oh, no, wait. Oh, what? So it's one thing. Gee, you know, it gets me because you put all this effort and you fall on hard times, and your cushion isn't there. You got to fight for it. But there's this other group, you know, that the cushion is, they've never known anything but the cushion. They've never had to do anything else. And it's generational too. And once you get into that generation, it's just expected. It's just expected. They use the same terms and everything. It's almost like, I know a person that applied for TSA, to work for the TSA, because it was a job and it didn't require a lot of effort, right? You just show up at the job and yell at people for having a watch in their pocket or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And they wouldn't hire them. TSA wouldn't hire them because they had an IQ in triple digits. You know, they had a work ethic. They could dress themselves. They're like, bop, bop, bop. This job is for people that can't do that. Now, that's like a violation of your civil rights. Maybe I want to do TSA. Maybe that's what, even though I've got a 183 IQ, a strong work ethic, I know how to dress myself, I'm well groomed and everything, and I'm polite to people. Maybe I want to work the TSA. I'll never get hired because they'll find a reason.
You know, it's kind of interesting because this was toward the end of my career. You know, my dad was still pretty well, and I knew I was going to be retiring soon. And I had applied for a job as an investigator at an insurance company. You know, I'm not going to name them. And here was the requirement. The requirement was that you had to be a lawyer, you had to be a private detective, and you had to speak Spanish. Okay, that was the three requirements for this. And it was a Illinois-based company. Okay, so I don't speak Spanish a lot, but I speak Spanish. I was a lawyer. I was a private detective. And what was interesting was I had recently done a case where I had gotten them like an incredible amount of money in restitution, like $400,000, and I delivered it to them, right? So anyway, about 3 months later, I see this ad, and I apply for the job, you know? And I find out I don't get the job, you know? And the woman calls me and she says, well, we gave the job to somebody else. I go, yeah? Who'd you give it to? And then she goes, what do you mean? I go, well, as far as I know, I said, there's only 8 lawyers in Illinois that are private detectives, and I know all 8 of them. So I'd like to know who you gave the job to, because I don't think any of them other than me applied for the job because I talked to them. And the woman said, well, we gave it to, you know, Pedro Gonzalez. It's a made-up name, you know?
Yeah.
And I go, well, he's not a private detective. Yeah, but he's a lawyer and he speaks Spanish. Okay, but I said, I can do all 3. She said, what do you mean? So I start speaking to her in Spanish. So then she goes, well, I'm going to have to tell my boss we're going to have to reopen. So I said, no, you're not. And she said, what do you mean? I said, I wouldn't want to work for you. And I go, just remember something. I said, I got you. You know, just recently I brought in $400,000 in restitution to your company, but yet you play games with people. And then I said, I don't want to have anything to do with you guys, you know. But it's kind of funny that you know, they're always looking for an angle. You know, they're always looking for.
Well, they write up, you know, when they know who they're going to hire, but they put the job out there anyways. And then they waste a bunch of people's time. You know, applying for the job, but they already know. The department was the same thing. They were asking, Chicago, right, police department, they were asking for guys that had top secret military clearances, that had, you know, that had dealt with, that were detectives. And they wanted to bring them down and put them on the counter-terrorist task force with the feds.
Yeah.
Me and my buddies all in the reserves together, right? And we're all military intelligence, and we all have top secret security clearances, military intelligence, and we're detectives, and we've deployed, and I've actually interrogated Tier 0 terrorists, right? I've actually worked, you know, that stuff. They pick a guy, doesn't have any military clearance at all, never was in the military. They knew who they were going to pick already, but they had to walk through it. I go in for an interview to teach at the academy, and they hand me a general order, and they say, you got 10 minutes to prepare a 5-minute brief on how you teach a class in this general order. Okay. I look at it. I look at page 1. I look at page 2. At the bottom, page 2 ends mid-sentence, mid-paragraph. I go, This is a 4-page general order, at least, right? So I go to where they have the general orders. I pull the other page 3 and 4. I read it over real quick, and I prepare my thing. I come in, all right, to the interview, and I go, was this a trick question? They go, what do you mean? I says, you handed me page 1 and 2 of a 4-page general order. And they go, well, you're the first one that's brought that to our attention. I says, I guess I got the job then, huh? I knew I wasn't getting the job. It was a joke. It was a waste of my time on my day off to go down there.
Right.
That really aggravates me, you know? Just be a man about it. Say we're hiring this person because we like him, or we're hiring this person because we have to, because his uncle, you know, I owe his uncle a favor or something like that. We're not hiring for his qualifications.
No.
You know?
Yep, you're right. You're exactly right.
It was, you know, I think counterterrorism is important. It really is. We kind of talked about terrorism last week. I think it's important. So wouldn't you want the best qualified people there? Especially if you're a law enforcement organization?
You would hope. You would really hope.
But that's human nature. People doing favors. You know, people doing favors. People looking at you and say, hey, I applied for a job when I was really desperate for a job. And it was at a liquor store. It was maybe I should name it Rothschild's, right? Rothschild's Liquors on the west side. Just to be a clerk. Because I was applying for everything. You know? Here I am. I got a college degree. I got all this stuff. At least the guy, when I go into an interview, he tells me flat out, we can't hire you. I go, why? He says, you're white. I go, so? He goes, oh, they'll riot. You know? They can't have you there. Even though I passed their little test with all the names of the street names for the liquor. You know, and but he was flat out straight up with me. I got respect for that guy.
Yeah.
He was okay. He tried to hook me up with a security ADT. They didn't want nothing to do with me either.
Yeah.
Who knows? It all works out. You got to have faith to make it work out. So,
faith and persistence.
So don't be discouraged if you're applying for Social Security disability benefits. Just keep appealing it. And if you're going to be, if you're legit, they're just going to drag you around. But you need to get it in there so that when they find in your favor, when you hit a reasonable person and they find in your favor, you know, you'll get that back pay. Same thing with your veterans benefits. Don't be discouraged. You might get a good rater, you might get a bad rater. You might get a good VSO, you might get a bad VSO. If you get a bad one, move on to another one. You know, don't get in a fight with these guys. Just human nature, you know. If you go in and you're polite to someone, I'm not talking saccharine polite, all right? That fake sweetness. Everyone can tell, right? You're polite with them and you treat him like he's the professional and everything, he's going to help you more. You go in and you get a fight with him, how hard do you think, even though it's his job, right? How hard do you think he's going to work for you?
Not very hard at all.
Yeah, you know, there should be no difference, but if you can't get along with them, don't get in a fight with them, move on. Get another guy, right? If you get denied, appeal it. Like right away, it's paperwork. Go back to your VSO. Normally, a lot of them are writing the appeal before they submit the one and they already got the appeal ready to go because, you know, some of these guys the raters just rubber stamp denials and they got the appeal ready to go on them, which is causing more backlog. Right. And, you know, keep going to the highest level until the last guy says, until the Supreme Court says, no. Just take it up the chain. Because it really is that important. There should always be accountability to our government for what they do with our soldiers, sailors, airmen, guardians, Coasties. I think
Posties.
the Coast Guard people, but they call the Space Force guys guardians, right?
Right.
And if the government has to, be stronger. No one wants to deny veterans benefits. That's like the kiss of death to your career, no matter what, right?
Yeah.
So